So I was the youngest in a large Irish family that accepted, even cherished, violence as an integral part of everyday life. In my house, we wrestled, raced, slugged, and body slammed our way through childhood. Maybe spending so much time waiting in the emergency room either to get stitches or to wait for someone else in the family to get stitches or to do both. Maybe that was our version of intimacy. Maybe wrestling subbed for hugging. Maybe punching subbed for kissing. Or maybe we were just classically repressed Catholics. All I know is that until I was 12, my middle-aged mother could pin me in under a minute. She had a mean half Nelson. This was in Camarillo, California, circa 1970s, before the outlet malls, before the regular malls, before the mini malls, when Camarillo was known for the state hospital for the criminally insane. You know, the good old days. When the Santa Ana winds blew across the empty fields and deposited tumbleweeds on the lawn so perfectly round, we built snowmen out of them. These were the mean streets of my faux stucco tract house suburbia, and the meanest of all, by far, was the recess yard of St. Mary Magdalene Grammar School, a killing field for innocence. All those blue polyester uniforms stained by bloody noses, and unbelievably, it wasn't always the Sisters of Notre Dame who drew first blood. The yard was tough, and I was not. Blondie, not his real name, of course, was in 8th grade and huge. He should have been in high school, but he was held back for fighting and drugs. Not sure which was first or worse. He was that deadliest of combinations, stupid and ignorant. Arrogant and confident in the way only truly clueless people can be. In short, he was an asshole. I was 2 grades below and 6 and about half Blondie's size. I was a decent athlete, but I was skinny as a beanpole and awkward as a beanpole. I had yet to discover drugs or fighting, unfortunately, but I was smart and generally people liked me. I was a little mensch. Catholics can use that word because we used to be Jews. Blondie was mentored by the villains on ABC's after-school specials. They were his role models, punching, pushing, stealing ding-dongs from lunchboxes. This was the daytime TV sum of his identity. How sad that he never tried to more fully develop and own his bully nature. But one day, like the idiot I am, I had had enough. I made it clear to everyone at recess who would listen that Blondie was an asshole and that I was not going to take it anymore. I felt so important standing up for justice amongst that sea of blue polyester, those bright young faces looking up to me, as hopeful as the day Sister Mary Pius briefly fell asleep during a test. Of course, it didn't take long for Blondie to hunt me down on the recess yard because to a 6th grader, consequence is a vague concept. Now, my dad was a huge physical guy and had boxed and played football and drank and smoked and fornicated. And so from a childhood filled with his very inappropriate stories and the general physicality of everyone in my home, I knew what was expected of me. But I was also very ignorant. I had seen all the old Western movies and thus actually believed that punches made that little sound. So I swung first, jumping up and connecting Blondie right in the mouth before he could even say anything. And imagine my shock when I did not hear that sound. It didn't make much sound at all. But, and here's one of the most important disillusionments from my childhood, the massive counterpunch that Blondie landed on me did make a sound. A big sound inside my head. A very loud ping like a tuning fork that reverberated in my skull for 2 days. Yes, Blondie beat the Holy Mary, Mother of God shit out of me. Later, my dad listened to my tearful story, and much like any wise TV sitcom dad, asked me, what in the name of hell happened? To which I did not really have a good response. And then, barely controlling himself, glancing out of the window as though he hoped the neighbors didn't hear of my dishonor, he implanted a sentence that stuck in my brain for 10 years. Listen, boy, Marlboro hanging from the corner of his Dick Tracy lips. Listen, boy, one day you need to track that punk down and clean his goddamn clock. You understand me, boy? Yeah. I understand all too well. Every day for 10 years, that sentence, like a prison sentence, played over and over in my head. Years later, just like my dad and my brothers before me, my body exploded, both naturally and through steroids, of course. And I grew huge and fast, football, track, boxing. And then the summer, I was leaving to play college football at a huge, the parents aren't home, don't know whose house this is, party. I came around a corner, and there, below all the pot smoke, sprayed with the flickering blue of a stared-at but unwatched TV, slumped 3 losers who clearly had been doing more than just pot. And there was Blondie. After all these years, really, it was Blondie's clothes. His body and being had just kind of sunk away from them, and his clothes were empty, and his faded face just floated like an oval on top. He looked up at me, and he had no idea who I was. I doubt he knew who he was at that moment. But my dad's sentence didn't play in my head. My head was perfectly quiet. Every day for 10 years, it played on a constant loop. And now here Blondie is at last, and silence, until I heard, "What's the point?" That's what my brain said. What's the point? That tiny, analytical sentence exploded into the most revolutionary idea in the entire history of my family. What's the point of cleaning his clock? A few years ago, my dad was very old and quickly deteriorating, and I finally told him what happened. A deathbed confession of my great betrayal of my family. Even after all that time, I felt the hot rush of shame that I had let Blondie go. Despite the hospital location, somehow a Marlboro was still hanging. He stared at me for quite a bit, and then he said, "Thank God you didn't hit him, boy." What? Why? You'd have killed him. What? He explained, "Not long after telling you to clean his clock, I realized you'd grow into another me. And I regretted telling you that because I knew if you started in on him, boy, you'd kill him. I prayed every day that you'd forget what I said, boy. Why didn't you just tell me?" Because I knew one day you'd understand what I never did. What's the point? Yeah, Dad, I did finally understand at the last possible moment. I was shocked how big his hand still was when he reached out for mine. No, boy, that wasn't your last possible moment. Thank you.